Great. Thank you, Meredith. It's wonderful to be here. And congratulations to you and your team for being able to move so adeptly to a virtual conference. I think we are all learning day by day more about this technology.
One of the barriers, I think, to remaining engaged and active is the fact that we are living in these low density places where you really need to drive and where it's really hard to get services to people if they need them. So there's really very few transportation alternatives and all that. But all that said, living in cities does not necessarily alleviate these problems. Mass transit may exist, but isn't set up for older adults. Neighborhoods may be dense, but no more walkable or serviceable for older people. So I think it's fair to say that across the US, a major impediment or challenge to remaining active and engaged is that we have serious gaps in the kinds of places that will support healthy longevity. And in the realm of actual housing, the single family house where most older adults live is the least accessible form of home that we have in the country. And the last thing I just want to mention, I guess, to start us off here is, while it's not a physical element, housing affordability is massively important to being able to be active and engaged and healthy.
And to pick up on what Jen said, what matters a lot to people is being able to stay in their community, maybe not in their own house, but in their community. The other thing that matters enormously to people is to be able to be mobile, to have transportation, to have mobility. And I hesitate to use the word transportation because it's not all about things with wheels, right? This is partly about sidewalks and well-lit streets. But people want to be able to get from point A to point B on their own. And they also want to be economically secure. And then the final thing that I would add or highlight for you is housing is a very important foundational piece of this. But as people get older and as their needs change, we need to have a way to very easily integrate services that people need into where they're living.
I think aging in community is the only thing that answers every single one of the barriers that Jen and Robin talked to. I can talk in a little bit when it's my turn and you want me to about how we address every single one of the barriers, and that for people who live with us, in fact, there are no barriers to aging and engaging in community life and in a vibrant. The other barrier I would just add is because of the other barriers, loneliness, isolation, and lack of agency to create your own future is all tied to housing and aging in community. And so I don't want to lose that piece.
As we look at this kind of ideal of housing that is needed, is there a mismatch between what's available and what people need?
Yes. Short answer, yes. Yes. There's a serious mismatch. With so many people not affordably housed, with so many people in low density places, which are not themselves bad, but it's the problem of accessing them with transportation, providing services. And I think to Robin's point about people want to stay in their communities, I think in a lot of these places that are lower density, we lack options for people to move to from where they are. So
yes, I mean, everything Jen said, I agree with. But I do think that there is some really wonderful innovation out there to better use the housing stock we have. Cities and towns, some flexibility to do things like add accessory dwelling units. There are some programs that are looking at co-housing. So I think individual communities are really trying to innovate.
How do you see housing that is specifically devoted to older folks, maybe exclusively? How does that relate to the argument that it's better to have the generations mixed?
Well, I think it's a very good question, and we should all debate it. What I find is, in order to have the rich services and programs that Robin was referring to, which I do think are important, you need a density of concentration of people who need those services, and we find that density pretty much about 150. So there's that density issue. Now, what we do to combat that is we have 24 separate intergenerational programs. So kids are in our building, and we bring our folks to kids. If we could figure out how to get the density to make the services efficient and have more families then that would work too.
Healthcare. How do you see the healthcare system intersecting with the housing system? But are there ways in which there are promising things happening in that dimension and more that we could do?
Great, terrific question. I came to this job 5 years ago after spending 35 years in healthcare. So I came to this job thinking it was all about healthcare, right? And I learned fast that it's actually as much about transportation and housing and isolation and loneliness and caregiving as it is about healthcare. I know that Amy is working on models that leverage volunteerism, that leverage wellness, and that try to push some of those big expenses as far downstream as possible. So I think there are important investments that we can make upstream in wellness and prevention that will help us avoid some very, very big expenses further down the road.